Ladies, gentlemen, and Vault Hunters of all ages, we are only a couple of days away now from the release of Borderlands 4. And if you haven't worked out which of the Vault Hunters you want to choose for your first playthrough, you're running out of time. But don't get too stressed out, because this is a beautiful decision. It's a cool moment. There's no real wrong choice, and you can always play multiple characters through secondary playthroughs. In the end, just choose the character whose vibe you like the most, and who looks like the most fun for the way that you want to play the game. That said, for those who think that character might be Vex, let's talk through her in her entirety. We'll cover a bit of her lore background, stuff like that, but for the most part today we'll be talking about her entire kit of gameplay, how she actually functions in the game, her passive trait, her action skills and how they work, and since the full skill trees have been released on the official Borderlands website, we can talk about stuff from those too in a fair bit of detail. But also, on top of all that, thanks to the folks over at Gearbox, we have had early access to play Borderlands 4, and in that time I have played a fair bit of Vex. I've done up to level 15, and while there's a limited amount that I'm allowed to talk about and share from that play session at this time, I can use it to give you some new footage of her abilities in action, some gameplay, while also having some extra context to provide for the skill tree. With that said, before we get to the gameplay side of things, for those who want their Vault Hunter to have strong, interesting dialogue and voice line delivery, the voice actor for Vex is Judy Alice Lee.
My name is Judy Alice Lee, and I'm playing Vex.
Enough is enough! I am your undoing!
Some easily recognizable credits would be Luna Snow from Marvel Rivals, Malinoway, the main character in Hades 2, which is in early access at the moment, Neyrel from Diablo 4's main story, and Yunjin from Genshin Impact, which is a lot of leading roles or otherwise very impactful slots within games. Very solid voice actor, and you won't find yourself disappointed by any means. Vex is of course the Siren of our group of Vault Hunters in Borderlands 4. Sirens hold an extremely unique and special place in the Borderlands universe, being arguably one of the two most important groups of people in the lore, the other being the Iridians. There are 6 Sirens in the universe at any given time, and their powers pass down when they die. A Siren can choose an heir for their powers, in which case the powers would pass down as they were, like Maya passing Phase Lock onto Ava in Borderlands 3, but if a Siren dies without a chosen heir, the powers will manifest in a different way. And this is what we have with Vex, who has Siren powers that we have never personally seen in the series before, and that makes her quite exciting as an extra data point in the lore, just to learn more about Sirens as a concept. Her backstory before she had her Siren powers develop is somewhat normal for any character in the universe. A rough upbringing, we even see her working a retail job in her character short, and as someone who has worked retail in the past, I can only imagine it's about 1,000 times worse in Borderlands, so I totally get her sarcastic quips, and her energy just sort of makes her seem like she's done with everything. But despite being the ultimate pessimist, she is still fully believing in helping others. No matter how her life is, she knows that other people will have it worse. And now that she has the power to actually change things herself, she's happy to stick it to the people in power. As far as the story relevance, it's unlikely that any individual character of the Vault Hunters will have more potential impact and potential implications than a Siren would. So if you are going to be playing solo, you only have one character to experience, and you want what feels like the canon choice, this is probably the one you would want to go for. That said, let's move on to the gameplay. In Borderlands, all damage has an elemental affinity. Things like how incendiary damage does bonus damage to red health bars or flesh, and shock damage does bonus damage to blue health bars or shields. Every Vault Hunter has an ability to synergize with a few of these elements, but Vex is unique as the only Vault Hunter who technically synergizes with every element, and also kinetic as well. And this is heavily caused by her passive trait called Phase Covenant. This makes her action skill and melee damage match the type of her currently equipped gun. So if you're using an incendiary weapon, now your action skill is incendiary damage, and so is your melee. If you then switch to a shock weapon, now it's shock damage on your action skill and melee. This makes her arguably the most adaptable of any of the Vault Hunters as far as having the right damage type for the right situation and being able to build around it as such, but also she has certain skills and paths that you can choose if you want to build around pure kinetic damage, which is pretty fun and unique. And for a further example of this visualized in combat, here's the Panther pet that you can get, one of the action skills that you can use, and you can see it changing colors when you swap guns to using different elements, because the color of the Panther represents the element type it is in that moment. Also, you can pet this pet, and I just feel the need to mention that because a lot of people will enjoy that. Moving on to her action skills then, and in this section I will also be detailing out the skill tree tree is attached to each skill, their augments, capstones, and any of the important later on passives that will shape your overall playstyle, to help give you an idea of the variety of different ways that you could meld each of these skills into different options of playstyle by the time that you get into the late and endgame section, as there is a ton of possible variety for builds in this game. First up then, let's talk about the Dead Ringer skill. This is a skill that can hold up to 3 charges. You press the action skill button to use one charge, and you choose between either a Spectre minion, which is a phase clone that has a gun, sits still, and fires from their spawn position at range, or a Reaper minion, which is a phase clone with a massive scythe that will chase enemies around as well as taunting them to attack it instead of attacking Vex herself or the Spectres. This is one of 2 minion heavy action skills for Vex, and the existence of these should make her one of the better solo play options, as it just means less enemy attention focused on you. Similarly, it should make her better with more precise weapons like a sniper rifle, for example, as it gives you a bit more space to work with, just logically speaking, if things aren't attacking you. Moving on to the skill tree, the one attached to this is called the 4th seal. The base tree augments on this are Gas Blaster, which gives your Spectre minions the Gas Blast ability, which is a ranged explosion of gun damage that happens either when you spawn a Spectre minion or any time that a Spectre reloads. The Coven augment gives Vex and minions health regeneration after spawning a Reaper, which is extra relevant because the way the minions actually work is instead of having like a timer or duration, they have a permanently escalating health drain effect, which means they are slowly going to die over time, and the speed at which they die will get faster the longer they exist. The only way then to make them stick around longer than they would by default is to heal them in some way. As well, this also gives Vex and minions bonus crit chance anytime that you summon a Spectre minion, and both of these can stack. So this one is great for giving buffs that you are in control of to both types of your minions and yourself. Gas Blaster is more Spectre focused specifically. This one instead is more of a mix between both types of minions. I also want to call it the Cursed Blade passive in this first section, which applies Curse on your melee attacks, which is a debuff that makes the enemy take kinetic status effect damage anytime they are hit by gun damage. This includes the Spectre minions. And this just seems like a really fun way to build, honestly. Just make a ton of Spectres, use a high fire rate weapon so you can trigger it as frequently as possible, and then slap an enemy and watch all of the bonus ticks come off of them anytime they're hit by a bullet. The first branching path on the skill tree for Vex has the Wither augment. This makes Spectre minions cast Wither when they spawn, which applies a debuff to an enemy, dealing damage over time and increasing their damage taken. Killing a withered enemy allows them to apply the debuff to a new enemy. The extra fun part of this is that the limit is 1 Wither per elemental type, which means it incentivizes switching elements in between every Spectre spawn that you do to make multiple different elemental Spectres. This branch also has the Heirloom Capstone. Spectres gain a copy of Vex's currently equipped gun for a duration, but only one Spectre can have the copied gun at a time, and it will always be the most recently spawned one. This may not sound that exciting for people who have never played into the later stages of a Borderlands game, but all it takes is one solid legendary weapon, and suddenly this capstone will give you a massive power spike whenever it activates. That said, this branch in general is a heavy focus on the Spectre minion specifically, and I would say it's a heavier focus on spreading them out and having like one active at a time so you can make the most of the way the capstone works, rather than just bursting out all of your minion charges in one go. This tree also has specific synergies for the corrosive element, if that's one that you want to focus on a little bit more. The second branch has the Hellish Harvest augment. This one gives Reaper minions a new ability that does a big combo of melee AoE damage and regenerates their health when hitting enemies with it. They use this whenever they spawn and on every third melee attack as well. This should make the Reaper minions last way longer as a result. The capstone in this branch is called Grim Reaper. This lets you press and hold the action skill button to short-term create a special Grim Reaper minion that drains from nearby enemies. It does status damage over time and regenerates health depending on the number of enemies that it's draining, and arguably more importantly, any enemy that dies from this has a chance of leaving behind a new Reaper minion for free. So as you can tell, this branch is a heavy focus on the Reaper minions specifically, but then also it has a focus on incendiary damage specifically too if you want to target that element more than the others, and it has a melee override skill as well called Haruspex, which replaces all melees with a thrown phase dagger that can crit, essentially the new Jakobs throwing knife grenade the way that those work, but it's just your melee attack itself. This has a cooldown on it in between which you would just use regular melees, but the cooldown gets reset whenever you get a kill. There's an upgrade for this as well, which makes you throw throw 5 phase daggers at once from both hands instead of only throwing 1, but it makes the kill skill effect only refund 1/3 of the cooldown now, instead of refunding the full thing. But it's still a really cool ability, especially because, again, Vex's melee damage attunes to whatever damage type her gun is dealing. Then the final branch for this tree has the Banshee's Wail augment, which gives Reapers the Banshee's Wail ability. This does damage to nearby enemies and grants overshield to allies, and anything that boosts Reaper damage also boosts the amount of overshield granted by them, and any enemy hit by this attack also does reduce damage afterwards too. The capstone for this branch is one of the most potentially interesting ones in the game, called Dark Pact, because the first line is simply, Vex can now equip 2 augments. Every other character, and Vex if you don't have this equipped, can only use 1 augment at a time. Vex with this capstone can have 2. Augments have some pretty major potential effects on your gameplay and your playstyle. They can completely change how the action skills work, and the fact that you can have 2 of them is a pretty big deal. On top of that, you get a new ability, press and hold the action skill button to use Dark Pact, which restores health for all phase clones, gives all phase clones movement speed and attack speed, and phase clones do not lose health over time while it is active, as well as having their health loss per second reset when the effect ends. So essentially, you would want to mass burst spawn a bunch of minions, wait until they're about to fall over, press this button to activate this skill, and then completely reset their health, give them a boost, and when the effect ends, they will reset as if they are fresh minions. So you basically get double minion duration whenever you're able to use this, along with a bunch of other bonuses too. As a result, and in comparison to the other 2 branches, this one applies to all minions, so it's more the general use branch for people who like both Reapers and Spectres, and in large amounts, especially as you get 2 augments, which you can use as one that affects Spectres and one that affects Reapers. This branch as a whole is heavily focused on just giving you as many minions as possible, as varied minions as you want, for as long as they can possibly up, while making all of the minions that you make much stronger too. Next up, let's talk about the Incarnate action skill. This is the one that sprouts demonic wings out of your back and puts you into a really cool, powerful mode for a duration after activating it. And during this mode, you can press the action skill button to fire out Eldritch Blast with your offhand. This is just a blast of damaging energy that hurts when it hits, and any gun damage that you deal while it's on cooldown will reduce the cooldown for Eldritch Blast. So if you got a high fire rate gun, or just you do lots of damage in general, you can get lots of Eldritch Blasts out. The skill tree tied on this one is called Vexcalation, and this is one of the more interesting base skill trees in my mind. This is the one that has the Leeching Attunement passive right in the top row for kinetic attunement, and it gives you permanent lifesteal and reload speed when you're using kinetic weapons. It has the Geist Wave augment for a piercing wave fired forwards when you activate Incarnate, instead of just an AoE explosion around you, which also increases any enemy hits damage taken for a short duration afterwards. There's also the Energy Vampire augment, which makes Vex just deal status damage to nearby enemies, as well as giving her overshield when this happens. And when you are in Incarnate mode and you kill enemies, you get stacks of the Energy Vampire buff for increased damage on status effects just in general as a whole. So not just the radius around you, but all status damage you do. As well, while we are talking about kinetic attunement shenanigans, she's got the Bloodletter passive, which is awesomely unique. It creates a straight up kinetic damage status, making gun or skill critical hits apply bleed, which is kinetic damage over time, which is quite unique. And interesting to note here as well, you do not have to be using kinetic attunement, which means you don't have to be using a kinetic gun to cause this to happen, at least based on the wording here. So once you have the passive, you just have another status that you can constantly apply. The first branch for this tree has the Iron Maiden augment, which makes the initial phase explosion of Incarnate, and then any Eldritch Blast restore shield for each enemy hit, as well as increasing their damage based on your current shield capacity, which is something that definitely has some silly scaling potential in the endgame. The Desecration capstone makes this phase explosion and Eldritch Blast from Incarnate create hazards that deal damage over time where they hit, as well as making Eldritch Blast itself home in onto enemies and do an AoE burst of damage if it hits an airborne enemy. So this is the relatively pure Incarnate branch, focus hard on Incarnate as it is as a baseline with some minor additions. It gives you the ability to apply some nice statuses, and this is also the branch with radiation damage synergy options too if you like that damage type, and synergies for shield specifically. The second branch here has the Witchy Triggerfinger augment, which makes damage with Eldritch Blast or Phase Explosion fully refill your current gun's magazine, as well as giving you a stack of the Witchy Trigger Finger buff, which increases gun damage per stack, which is pretty solid in itself. It also has the Vibe Check Capstone. This makes Eldritch Blast a charge skill with 3 charges, but when you activate it, it will consume all the charges at once to ricochet off of enemies and hit new enemies once per charge consumed. This capstone also doubles the cooldown reduction effect when you're dealing gun damage. Essentially, this branch is more focused on gun damage itself and your shooting ability, and using that to make Incarnate itself stronger, and using Incarnate to make your gun damage stronger, rather than Incarnate itself being the full main focus. And the rest of the passives here do back this up, and it's worth mentioning this branch has the Strike Me Down passive, which is essentially a free revive when you go down. The third branch has the Grave Harvest Augment, which gives you a kill skill to spawn soul orbs while Incarnate is active, which deals status damage over time to any enemies that are near them. You can interact with the soul orbs to make them explode to deal ordnance damage as well from range, and if you walk into a soul orb and you actually connect with it, you will pick it up to gain some health restored and extra action skill duration, which is a neat list of effects, but I'd argue the most important part of that is that it means you can get extra action skill duration from kills with Incarnate active to make it stay active much longer in fights with lots of enemies, longer than you normally would be able to have it work. The capstone in this branch is called Heartpiercer, which makes Eldritch Blast sacrifice a part of your own health to use and become a piercing wave of damage instead of just a blast. This can also heal any ally that it hits on top of only damaging enemies. It also gains bonus damage and healing given based on the amount of health that you sacrifice to use it, and it removes the cooldown from Eldritch Blast, meaning that you can throw them out as much as you want as long as you actually have the health to do so. This also synergizes with the health regen from the Augment in this branch, and as a result, you may have guessed, the branch as a whole is very focused on health regen, max health, action skill damage, and keeping you in Incarnate as much as possible while making Incarnate itself the real star of the show. Then finally for skills, let's talk Phase Familiar. This is a skill that gives you the awesome Saber-Tooth Panther Phase Companion. This companion will just follow you around and exist passively, and so while the Dead Ringer skill is also a minion skill, I would describe Dead Ringer being sort of the necromancy minion skill that requires active management to use properly and actual thought, and Phase Familiar being the minion action skill that gives you a more permanent passive friend that you get some control over on occasion. You cannot choose who he attacks moment to moment, but you have command skills from your Augment that give you a bit more precision, and the active portion of this action skill is when you press the button, Trouble turns into a badass, Trouble being the name of your Panther. It gives him a full health restore, large damage increase, and for a short duration, it makes him just stronger in general. The skill tree tied to this one is called Here Comes Trouble, which is quite aptly named, and the augments in the early section are Violent Outburst, which lets you press and hold the action skill to make Trouble explode to damage enemies around him. This sacrifices a portion of his health. It will kill him when he's just in his base version, but he comes back after a short respawn timer, and if you use this while he is in badass mode, it only takes 33% of his health, so you can do it multiple times in a row. The other augment here is called Blink Strike. Press and hold action skill button to make Trouble teleport to a specific enemy, and then hit them for a pile of damage, which is a guaranteed critical strike against enemies under half health. The first branch for this tree has the Hexus Nexus augment, which makes Trouble taunt enemies to make them actively avoid targeting Vex herself. It gives you a bit more space, as well as giving you a new command skill that makes Trouble charge a targeted enemy and do melee damage to them, as well as creating a singularity that pulls enemies into it afterwards. The capstone for this branch is called Trouble Bubble, which gives Trouble an overshield whenever he deals damage, and while the action skill is active, Trouble does elemental ordnance damage to nearby enemies, matching your current attunement. As well, this branch also has a focus on cryo synergies if you like freezing your enemies too. Then the second branch has the Vorpal Fang augment, which lets Trouble have crit chance on his attacks and adds a command skill to make Trouble summon phase daggers above his head that will then fire out at range at nearby enemies. This branch also has the Double Trouble capstone, which gives Trouble a chance to create an illusion of himself near an enemy when he does damage, and crits have double the chances. As well, when the action skill is activated, any illusions also get the badass buff bonuses, and the rest of this branch just has a high focus on critical hits specifically, and using crits to reduce action skill cooldown too, which is quite neat. The third and final branch for this then has the Beast Mode augment to make Trouble enter Beast Mode from the command skill. This makes him fully damage immune for a short period of time, and then also gives him movement speed and attack speed. This mode is extended each time that you get a kill as well. The capstone for this branch is called Unsealed. It makes Trouble apply marks to his current target, which is a debuff that increases increases their gun damage taken. It also gives you a kill skill where any enemy killed while marked gives Trouble a buff called Unseal. This gives him health regeneration and increased damage, with this buff doubled in effect with the action skill active as well. The rest of the tree has shock damage synergy specifically if you like shock damage, and it leaned into that very heavily, honestly. That pretty much does it then, everyone. A bit of background for Vex, her passive, her action skills, and the various playstyles that you can get from all of it. I know there's a lot in here, but that's because there is generally just so many ways that you can play with each Vault Hunter this time around, and personally, I love that. Hopefully one of the playstyles I've mentioned here gels with you and gets you excited and will help you make your choice of which Vault Hunter to play when the game releases. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, I'm the conductor of the poop train!
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.